Hello, everyone, and welcome again. This is our second conversation here for FireCircle 2022, Healing Our Systems, offered by Powerhouse. Powerhouse is a community of practice for diverse leaders, change makers, and social impactors ready to walk a path of relational leadership for future generations. My name's Tina Overbury. I am going to introduce everybody here in just a moment. I am the managing director of Powerhouse, and I'm with you today from Nequalquam, also known as Bowen Island. Grateful to rest, to play, and to create on the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish people. A little bit about FireCircle. FireCircle 2022, Healing Our Systems, is a relational leadership gathering across sectors. We're bringing leaders together over a virtual fire to reimagine from within the systems we are in for future generations. And Healing Our Systems is the fourth FireCircle event in a series of 10 cross-sector gatherings hosted to advance the 2030 UN SDG agenda of a more sustainable future for all people and the world by 2030. And the really big cool thing that we're offering this year is at the end of FireCircle 2022, Powerhouse with Impact Arts will be creating and submitting a detailed case for support to the various levels of government bodies, labor leaders, and social impact organizations who are in the position to bring forward these changes and reimaginings that we're gathering through our conversations here with you and at our fire. Today's conversation is part of a pre-event discussion series to help warm up your mind because you're watching and you're joining us at the FireCircle later, and your imagination for the big event happening on September 22nd to the 24th. And our focus today is healing the system of business and capitalism. I'm both your host and your moderator today, and I'm going to start with just the lens I see the world through so you can meet me a bit. I'm a story artist, and I care deeply about the stories from which we come. And I see the complexity of communication as a vehicle for human connection. So that's just a little bit about me, but I want to introduce you to our conversationalist today. And I'm going to start by introducing you to Jen Harper. Jen is the founder of Cheekbone Beauty, which is an Indigenous-owned and founded digitally native Canadian cosmetics company founded in 2016. Cheekbone Beauty is known for creating high-quality, cruelty-free beauty products, including Cheekbone's signature line of lipstick, Sustain, which I know you're wearing today, Jen, because it's awesome. And in the spirit of reciprocity, Cheekbone has donated more than $150,000 to a wide variety of causes. And Jen's aim is to make a difference in the lives of Indigenous youth by creating a space in the beauty industry where Indigenous youth feel represented and seen. So welcome, Jen. I'm glad that you're here. And I'll introduce you to Hillary now. So Hillary Sampson of Transforming Ventures. Hillary is set to transform capitalism and our relationship with it. She's an experienced COO on demand, writing business plans for small to medium-sized businesses, social ventures, and not-for-profit organizations. And with Transforming Ventures, she offers us to consider that our businesses are a vehicle for a sacred journey, and it is possible to align our company to its true purpose and infuse that purpose into our systems and profitability. Yeah, profit too. So welcome, Hillary. And then Carrie Lockhart is a partner of Deloitte Canada. She is known for her ability to connect people in the business community, for being client-centric, and she has a focus on storytelling. She elevates entrepreneurs and aspiring leaders to drive action around barriers, to provide greater financial opportunities, and she supports business leaders to find their voice. So welcome, Carrie. Janet Mohapi Banks is a conscious leadership consultant and executive coach. She's an award-winning, internationally recognized type A high achiever who invites entrepreneurs and C-suite professionals to do what we do consciously. She's all about joy, expansion, meticulous intentionality, and living and working in right relationship with the life force connectivity that runs between each of us as one family. So welcome, Janet. And lastly, Jamie Glochet. Jamie, there's so much in your bio. I could read it over and over. I love it. I could dig into a conversation. Sorry, I just singled you out. Jamie is a co-director and co-founder of Native Women Lead, where she leads key initiatives in fund design, advancement, and partnership development while overseeing program design, international development, and data and evaluation efforts. She's recognized for piloting relationship-based lending, and Jamie has been recognized as a 2020 National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development 40 Under 40 Award recipient. She was also one of 25 people selected nationally to attend the 2020 Transform Finance Institute for Social Justice Leaders. So, welcome, Jamie. I sense that you and Carrie are going to connect after this. And I just want you to know I'm in awe of all of you because I work in words, but today's conversation is capitalism. It's dollars, it's business. And what Hillary has taught me is that numbers are the language of business. So I'm here to learn today. And we've set out 3 questions for everybody. So why don't we start with our first one? And I'm going to jump over to capitalism lady first. Hillary, let's open with you if that's all right. What do you think is the most common misconception about this sector or capitalism?
Yeah, thanks so much. I love being in this conversation. I would like just to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. And I'm really in the process of figuring out what it means to be here on this land as an uninvited resident, and look forward to all that continued learning journey as well in work and business. Thank you. So I think I'm in this conversation and I love it and it's evolving. And I think the first thing I'd like to talk about with capitalism is that there is this idea that it's kind of inevitable, that it's reality, that it's just how things are. And I think it's very important as we start this conversation to remember that these are just choices that a very specific group of people have made on our behalf, not on our behalf, in service, not in service. And we can choose something different. We can reimagine a different way to run our economic systems, to run our businesses. And I think that's where I'd like to start, is just with this openness that it's not reality, it's not inevitable. We can create something that actually works. I deeply believe that and have deep faith in that. Thank you.
Jamie, I want to pass to you if I may. You have such a varied background around your approach. Like that's my interpretation to finance and business. Where does that take you?
Thanks. Yeah, I have to agree with Hillary. When I think of capitalism, I think of finance and economies and um, entrepreneurship and small business development. And I really feel like one thing that's really stuck with me and resonated is something that Joy Anderson of Criterion Institute shared, and that I kind of carry on and kind of really hold, is that finance is a system made by humans and therefore we can change it. And I think that's really pivotal to really challenge the notion that capitalism and finance and that it's static and unchangeable, because I'm actually here to challenge and change the system while we're working within it. And I think as an Indigenous person, really trying to see the harm that capitalism has done, acknowledging it, but holding like the both and, that there's also opportunity and effort. So a lot of our work has been done to reclaim this idea that Indigenous people have always been incredibly entrepreneurial. And because of our wisdom of natural law and being able to pivot from different environments and conditions and just survival, we're actually positioned to be incredibly continually entrepreneurial. And I think that when we apply Indigenous framework or other ways of viewing the world, to the point Hillary made earlier around how this system was designed with or without us, or and I often feel like the system has been designed to exclude people. We can actually recreate and rebuild and dismantle and reframe systems that are meant to be inclusive of all people. So that's what I hold about this, is that it's malleable, it's changeable, it's moldable, and that if we want to seek economic justice for all people, that we are actually charged with this, I guess, this calling to really call out these inequities within the system of capitalism, but also then make recommendations on how to be much more inclusive. So that's where I'm landing at with this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. And I can see the reimagining between both you and Hillary here and the possibility. I want to swing over to Carrie, who, so much of your work is within a system, and
Mm.
curious what is coming up for you around misconceptions or adding to where this conversation is going right now.
Yeah, I think thank you all. Thank you, Tina, for inviting me to this conversation. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate the idea of Hillary and Jamie when you started about reimagining. I think right now there's a lot of individuals and organizations that are trying to do that. Right now, we hear about, see a lot of, I would say, purpose run organizations, and I put that in quotes because while some of them, I think some of them really are, and they have the purpose at the heart. Unfortunately, I think there's some that are using those words inappropriately, and they're truly not purpose run. They still have the mighty dollar. And that's what people are trying to reimagine. How do we have the heart of purpose and connect it in so that you can still have a sustainable organization, and that it can benefit everyone, not just a select few, not just the shareholders, not just the executive. That is very hard and very challenging to do. And we're stumbling, and we're figuring things out. And I'm seeing that with a lot of organizations. I'm seeing that within my own organization. And you can see it in people's eyes, and when you talk to them, like, they want to figure it out, they just don't know how. So the reimagining and just trying, and yeah, Tina knows this quite well about me. I'm just like, let's just try. It's not going to work always, but we got to figure something out, and we have to offer different platforms for different voices. And yeah,
Let's just try.
let's just try.
Just try.
Yeah. So that's when Hillary and Jamie were talking, that's what kind of struck me.
I see you, Janet. I see that impulse. Go for it. I was going to swing to you anyway.
Yeah. So, hi. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. So, as I was listening, I actually feel hope because we know that around, like, in the pre-80s, pre-Thatcher years, pre-Reagan years, we didn't run a shareholder capitalism. That wasn't a thing. It was stakeholder capitalism, and stakeholder capitalism provided for everybody. Yeah, pre-1980s, like, the CEOs, corporate CEOs, weren't earning more than around 30 times that of the average worker. Yeah. In the 90s, mid 90s, that jumped to around 60 times the average worker. And now we're living in this crazy time where CEOs are over and above, like, 300 times the average worker. It's about 325 last time I checked. 325 times the average worker in the company. That is clearly unsustainable. And that is the capitalism that does need to change. But what we know is that it didn't used to be like this. Before the mid 80s, before the early 80s, like I say, we used to have this stakeholder capitalism that did serve everybody. It served the workers, it served the leaders, it served the community. And then it switched to this shareholder type that only benefited the few at the top. So if it can do that switch, it can absolutely switch back again. And it takes the individuals to make that happen, because nobody at the top is going to want to jeopardize what they currently have. So it takes everybody else to go, you know what? I don't think this is working anymore. Let's find a different way of doing it. Let's look back through history and see how that used to work, because that used to work before. Everybody was kind of all right with that. And then this sort of greed took over. This, I need to be better than you. I need more than you need. And when we can truly just tap back into, actually, no, I don't. No,
Mm,
I don't. I don't need 325 times more than you need.
mm.
That's when it's all gonna turn around again. But like I say, I feel hopeful, because if it switched once, it can switch back.
Love that. Um, Jen, you have a product in the middle of this massive system, and I'm wondering where that takes you, because and I kind of want to pull a little bit on your story about, I know I didn't prep you on this, but like when I think about the system that we're in, you've thrown your whole self into a product that is living in this system. It had to come from a big piece of your heart. Where do you want to go with the misconceptions of the system or anything here?
Well, and the whole what Carrie talked about, just try. I think that's what our brand is doing. We're trying. We're in this trying to show that there's a different way to operate as a business. And really, I'll invite B Corp into the conversation, just because it's a step we took because we wanted receipts, credentials, legal binding agreements, if you will. Like when we became B Corp certified, that's a legal agreement to say 2% of our revenues are always going to go, whether regardless of profitability, to organizations for us that support Indigenous youth education and the environment. Those are our big missions that we want to support. And there's no other organization in the world, I think, that has such a strong structure or mandate. And we're in a space where we're doing this work every day. And I'm going to like the whole idea of flipping it and moving back that way. It feels very, very hard. I'm not going to lie. This is not easy. We're not a brand with billions, multi-millions of dollars in ad spend to even navigate getting the attention right now of people in the online space, in the Sephoras of the world. Sephora Canada, yes, great, that's our partner here. Sephora USA doesn't see the need for our brand in their stores yet, so that's like they're not ready for the, I think, the Native American narrative in the United States. They're just not ready for us. And in the importance of actually creating a brand that has this push where we're really trying to have the conversation about real sustainability and being transparent about it, about every step of this journey that we've been on, and bringing these products into the world. And it's a massive challenge. Like I think the misconception is it possible? Well, we're trying. And that answer is yet to be determined, because without enough cash flow, no business gets to go on another day or another week, another month. And I know it's a conversation every entrepreneur will truly understand, as those are the spreadsheets we're looking at. And that's the language this world speaks, is numbers, right? And we can't keep doing this if those numbers aren't growing. And so we're in the system, and we have to work within I think the sort of the framework of the system, but we also can still try. And that's what, people have asked, how we stayed so true to our vision and our why. And I ultimately owe that to being raised by parents who just have such strong values and principles, that was then passed on to me, and that is innately Indigenous, to be perfectly honest. That our love and care for the planet it's cultural. There is no other. I firmly believe we are the only culture in the world that cares, as much as I've seen as that we do about the the planet that we're on. And I think it's our voices and our engagement on these matters that will help. And it's just, getting people to listen to us. But when you look around the world at who's truly fighting for environmental rights, it's generally the indigenous people of those communities. And so we have a lot to offer, but we're such a small group of people that the allies are really, really important to the growth of our voice.
You just bridged us really into the next question, which is, okay, we can spend a fair bit of time in this middle section because that's what we're up to right now, reimagining, which is about the conversation of change. Like what could we change? What would we change if we could? What, if trying became doing, and I'm not saying trying isn't doing, but it's like, sometimes I think, and as a West Coaster, that we can emerge in Vancouver forever, which is like a West Coast Vancouver person, like we can try forever, but when trying gets traction, like change happens. Like I'm just going to open it up. I'm going to step back and go and just let people find their way through this conversation of change. Like, what would you change if you could? Where do you want to go with change? Whoever wants to jump in.
Okay, I'll jump in as nobody did. So what I know about change is that nobody changes unless they feel a sense of safety on the other side. So what we need to do is to provide some form of landing mat for people. So yeah, they can jump out of this current system that is so detrimental, but they need somewhere to land. So it's, where do they land? What can be created? What can be formed, like what communities, what movements that will allow this soft landing into this new world, this new economic future that we're heading into. So I think that's the question. How can we get a safe landing when we jump out of the system? I don't know if anybody wants to take it from there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sitting there going, like, there's so much stuff going on right now, like the quiet quitting, the great resignation. Like, Tina and I have talked about it, and I think we need to use the data. We need to use their language to prove that what they're doing is no longer working and that it's costing them. That's simple. That's the only way that you're going to hit the system over the head with the 2x4 and they're going to go, huh, okay. Because right now there's kind of like this, there's kind of a, I don't know, the wind in the sails. Like there's this push for purpose. There's this push for employees and putting, people first. But we're always 2 quarters away. And I say 2 quarters in a public company kind of reporting angle of that changing. We go into a recession, there's less revenue, companies aren't as profitable, and they will cut it. And if we instead use the language of business, of numbers, and say, this is costing you $40 million every single year because you're not doing this, that gets their attention. And I think that's the only way.
But there is that data. There's the data to prove that the more you look after your people, the higher your profits become. It's like magic.
Yeah, and there is the data, and there's tons of studies on it. What I'm saying is changing that narrative a little bit to say, you're more profitable, but it actually, if you don't, it's costing you even more.
Right. Okay.
So simple kind of analogy is the quiet quitting, the great resignation, all of this happening. Every single time your attrition number changes by a percentage, it costs you $10 million a year.
Yeah.
Measure that number. Instead of measuring revenue growth and profitability, or let's go one step further, measure both of them.
Yeah,
Measure revenue and profitability and attrition rate. and
Yeah.
say, that's what we're looking at now.
So if I'm hearing you right, the
Yeah.
change that you're suggesting is shifting what we're looking at, shifting what we're measuring. Yeah?
Yeah.
Where does that take? Where does that? I'm waiting. I'm looking at you, Hillary, because I know you lay awake at night thinking about all of this.
In the best way. In the best way. I do have hope, like Janet said, for sure. So I love I mean, I'm an operations consultant. I love a good system. I love a good report. I love a good measurement. All of that's great. But I do want to take it just slightly in a different direction, because I deeply believe that the reason that capitalism is not working is because it's created out of alignment with what is true.
Mm.
So you are off the rails of what we know to be true. And this is from my deep faith and belief and observation as a business person, that when one thing is true, it's true everywhere. If kindness is true, it is true everywhere. You don't section off. And this is, I believe, absolutely that the great resignation, when people are like, what's happening? I'm like, it's so obvious to me what is happening. And I don't mean that egoistically. I mean, we're out of alignment, and you can only have that cognitive dissonance in your soul for so long before you're like, I'm out. So for me, what needs to change is a system that actually aligns with what is true. So, for example, whether you have a spiritual belief or whether you've studied quantum physics, the fact that we're interconnected is kind of undeniable right now, and that what I do affects you and what you do affects me. And yet we've built this capitalistic system that completely rewards individualism out of alignment. And even, I love, Janet, how you brought up, the only responsibility is to increase shareholder value, which I call the world's most insane idea. Because who only has responsibility to one person? Or one thing. I'm responsible for me and my family. I'm responsible for, the lawn. Or my husband's responsible for the lawn. Like there's just, that's a crazy thought that you can be spending any part of your life only thinking about one responsibility. And that's what we've been asked to do day in and day out at our jobs, meeting the manager's responsibility, who's meeting their manager's responsibility, who's meeting their shareholders' responsibility. And it just has chipped away at us. And that's the hope and the beauty, is we're at this point where it's like, no, we need to have a system that aligns with what we know to be true. We are interconnected. We love wholly, and there's power in that love. We are responsible for so many things, and there's beauty in that big plethora of responsibilities that we have. Like when you have a child, it's just like the hugest responsibility and the most beautiful gift. Why would you want to say, no, for these 8 hours, I'm not responsible for the future of that world, that person, my soul, my planet? It's insane to me. It's crazy. And we can change things. I have deep faith.
Jamie, I want to. Yeah, I saw your mic. Go.
Thank you all. For me, what I feel like we're witnessing is a system collapse. We're seeing some real design flaws that have been there by design, but are also, we're seeing where the gaps are, and seeing the inadequacies and inequities in a system. So when you talk about quiet quitting or the great resignation, the increasing racial wealth gaps that are existing for people of color, whether in rural and urban spaces or Native communities, Indigenous communities, you're seeing a system that's not inclusive of everyone. And then when you look at the world and what's happening with climate change and late stage capitalism, as I've often heard, and the world burning down, like you're also seeing the results of that. So for me, and I appreciated what Jen said earlier about Indigenous people and worldviews. To your point, um, Hillary, I often felt like in our immersion stories as Indigenous people, like we've been taught these kinds of lessons of the world and what it means to not be cognizant of uh, our interconnectedness and our relationship to one another, including plants and animals and Mother Earth and our relationship to Mother Earth generally. If human beings cannot recognize that and acknowledge that and hold that in reverence, this is what's happening in our world right now by not prioritizing that relationship or honoring that. Couple things I wanted to also say is when I think of doing systems design or changing or challenging a system while you're in it, from the lens of equity, I think if you can do this for those most invisible, most vulnerable, you can actually apply this to all people. So for the work that we get to do, when we look at Indigenous women, particularly in the United States, we represent less than 1% of the population, so often are very much invisible. Safety is a big issue as we experience significant amount of violence. I think 4 and 5 of us will experience in our lifetime. So I look at how capitalism or economic safety, or the goal towards economic safety and agency and empowerment, actually then supports folks to achieve just general safety. And I feel like it's necessary as far as the changing goes to call the inadequacies in the system out, but also charge and empower other people to just try to take that leap. I've worked in finance for a couple of years, and oftentimes we had to underwrite people based on the 5 C's of credit, like what's your FICO score, how much assets do you have, do you have intergenerational wealth, do you have money saved up, and oftentimes that type of underwriting criteria is not beneficial and doesn't take into account the historical trauma, the historical injustice, the theft, and the enslavement of not only people and planet. So we're trying to challenge that and say, okay, that was created not for us or by us. And oftentimes when you're changing a system, you got to look at who is in positions of power and leadership, who are making decisions. And with a lot of the work that we do, it's really to focus on upholding and acknowledging and preserving Indigenous women's inherent power in decision making, so that we choose who we can fund and provide funding for as we flow, resources to our communities. And I just want to just also add to, like, the inclusion of Indigenous worldview into this greater ecosystem in the world of finance and capitalism is really critical at this time, because while we represent less than 5% of the population, we actually steward 80% of the world's biodiversity. And it's absolutely critical, especially when you're thinking about climate change and asset building, that you look to the original caretakers of this planet to learn how to do that in a way that honors that relationship with all. And that's all I'll add for now. Thank you.
You know what I think you just did, Jamie? What I heard anyway is Carrie's feeding the system to get to where we're trying to get to. And when you said, Indigenous people steward 80% of the biodiversity, that's the 2x4 example I think you were offering, right, Carrie? Like, smack the system with the data that it's not looking at, and to get to, like you.
Yeah.
Am I right? Am I picking that up right, Carrie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Jen, I want to go over to you. Again, you represent such an interesting part of the system you're in, right? Because a lot of us aren't dealing with a product. We're dealing with management of the system, but you're the product in the system. Cheekbone Beauty offers gorgeous products that are trying to get out there to consumers. Like, the system has to change in order for your products to get out there. Any recommendations, thoughts, like frustrations, joys around this change that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I know. I was like, where's the joy? Because I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't any. And so I'm just going to briefly share this, that my dad lives on our reservation in northwestern Ontario in Canada. And it's about 3.5 hours from the closest, like, city. And so we had started working with Sephora Canada in September last year, so a year ago, and he finally got to Winnipeg to see the podium and our display in the store. And my stepmom shared that he like sobbed outside the store after. And that is why you're in the system and fighting it, despite how challenging it is, because you just know the power, what this means to our communities. And it's not just my own family, it's for all communities, because I've had the privilege of getting this kind of feedback from so many people across North America, that just this concept of representation. And I had the most powerful experience for me to understand it. Just this past June, Sephora and I had done this huge campaign called hashtag Lost Over, and they had paid for a massive billboard inside the Eaton Center. So it's like one of the biggest malls in Toronto, in downtown Toronto. And it's the biggest billboard I've ever seen. And I used to go to the Eaton Center with my father. He lived in native public housing in Toronto, and I would take the Greyhound to go visit him, every other week. And he'd always wonder what I wanted to do. And it was always go to the Eaton Center, because I was a little girl and obviously love shopping. And I would go there with him. And most likely we'd experience some form of racism, because now I'm remembering this as a child. Like if he showed a status card, the shop owners arguing with him about the card, and people would accuse us of stealing, all kinds of things. And I'm sitting there seeing this billboard, and in really just, I think, in awe and in disbelief that as a kid I could never imagine owning a brand and having it then in a mall like the Eaton Center or Sephora. And I was blown away, because I didn't even ever think about that. Like those thoughts never crossed my mind. And then so that night we did an event at Sephora in the Eaton Center, where we had community. Everybody was coming to try on our blush, and it was just a fun event with the Sephora team at the Eaton Center. And this little girl, she comes in with her mom, her brother, and her auntie, and she's Anishinaabe like me, and she's telling me about her TikTok account. She's probably like 12 or 13, and just like so pumped and so excited to meet us. And I'm driving home back to Niagara that night, and I thought, oh my God, she's never going to question what's possible for her, because she just saw somebody that looks like her working with an organization like Sephora. And that's the power of representation. And so for us as a brand, everything we do is on this psychographic level, where sadly, sorry everyone, there's no data, right? Like, how do I put that on a spreadsheet? I can't do that. I'm grateful that we've managed to be working within this system, found investors that are also Indigenous, that understand that kind of, I guess, feedback or measurement that we're trying to achieve, which is social versus always about the bottom line and stakeholder dollars and all those things. But in this system, eventually, when our investors, who in any investor wants some kind of return on their investment. So that is still part of our conversations, because we're working within this system, all of us still at this point. And those are things that we can't always measure, I think, in on a spreadsheet, but it has so much power that it is so important, and it has to exist. And I truly feel, and I think the point that I really wanted to make was that it has to come down to people. We're talking about systems. Systems aren't energy. They don't have the ability to make decisions at checkout counters. And it's the people on, all of us as individuals have to change and make choices. And it's a character flaw in our society right now. Materialism is a character flaw, because it forces you to make somebody have less when you have more. And it's a whole space we're in right now, where it's like we have to redefine how we look at our wealth, and how it's being divided and shared.
Mic drop right there. I want you to know, Jen, that at the Fire Circle on the Friday, Christina Benti is actually going to open the conversation and unpack that we are the system, that systems are people. They're not these things that are outside of us. So I really, really appreciate that. And what I heard you say is the change, one of the changes we could make is, what if we started social measurement? What have we started that impact measurement? What have we started that representation measurement and those ripples? So I really hear that. Yeah. We're just moving into our last round and our last question. We've got about 10 minutes. And the last bit looks like we've actually just beautifully moved there, which is, where are you finding hope in this business and capitalism life that you are in? And I'm going to jump to Janet. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, me. I'm finding hope because I keep meeting amazing people who are doing the work. And the more people that I meet doing the work, like, like this book, if you need to read this book, this is a fantastic book. It's peer researched. It's, by Jess Rivington and Joanna C. And it's fantastic. It's reimagining everything that we've been talking about here. And reading books like this, knowing that books like this are being written, it gives me hope. It absolutely gives me hope, because we know that we do live in an abundant universe. We know that money isn't finite. We know that actually when we cut the cake, it just grows. They are printing more and more money every day. Money is not a scarce resource. It's just that we've been led to believe that it is. So yeah, like I say, this book, just knowing that, like you say, people are the system, and people are changing. The consciousness of the planet is changing. And, like the work that I'm doing, the work that I see other people doing, we know that we are going to get there. We are going to see the world that we wish to live in, because we all feel it so strongly within us that it's almost impossible for it not to happen. We just need to keep moving forwards, keep not ever believing that it can't be achieved, because that belief that it can't be achieved is what will sink us. It's not the reality, it's the beliefs that we hold.
Well, that's a carpet ride I want to get on. Thank you, Janet. Yeah, what a great way to open up this portion. Who wants to jump in next with where hope is living for you?
I can jump in. So I'm really appreciative of the past couple years, even though we've gone through significant collective trauma. I think it's also accelerated this conversation around what it means to speak truth to power, and people calling out how white supremacy and patriarchy actually affect systems of finance and capitalism, and had long-term effects on that. But I also see within the space of finance, within philanthropy, where folks are sitting with that discomfort and then looking at communities and how to address that and change that. Um, so with the work we get to do with relationship-based lending, we're creating completely different values and underwriting framework that challenges the 5 C's of credit, to say there's actually different ways to underwrite when looking at investing or funding folks, especially communities of color, to prove that Black and brown folks are not risky. We're not risky investments. The project that we worked on with the Co-op Capital Project here in New Mexico has so far lent $4.5 million to Black, brown, Indigenous, immigrant communities with a 99% repayment rate, not based on FICO scores, not based on intergenerational wealth, not based on how much assets we have. So it's proving that we aren't risky as people. I also see in the space where folks are being very much mindful of the trauma that has been caused by capitalism. So they're looking at healing that relationship with money. For example, Edgar Villanueva wrote a book called Decolonizing Wealth and Seeing Money as Medicine. And I've heard folks talk about it as a tool and really kind of healing that relationship that we have with scarcity and leaning more into abundance mindset and thinking. So I'm really excited about that, because if we can understand this harm and trauma and understand the psychological impacts that it has, and then how that affects financial behavior, then we're kind of getting to some root causes and healing that relationship so folks can truly lean into abundance mindset and feel empowered, and to have agency around their economic pathway. Um, yeah, I would also say that I'm seeing in the financial sector, to Jen's point, really about, as Cheekbone has become a B Corp, like there's this now focus on ensuring that business is doing things for good, where they're inclusive of people and planet and not just profit. So I'm really seeing that in the sector. That's incredibly hopeful. Um, yeah, so I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, I think I would reiterate a bit of what Janet said and Jamie is just the more I've talked to people about this is the hope comes from is that those individuals are really trying to lean in and they're trying to figure things out and that it's not this isn't acceptable anymore. And to Jen's point previously, you know, having that type of story where that little girl felt represented, like how can we measure that? Somehow. And there's like we're trying to figure that out because that does matter. It does matter. And that as we talked about, it's not just about revenue and profit. And seeing individuals that I've been so surprised by, I never thought that they would care, they're trying to really help, and they're leaning into an uncomfortable conversation rather than just avoiding it.
Go ahead, Hillary.
Yeah, where that takes me, definitely in the conversations I'm having too, but also in the, seeing with different eyes. So there is a phrase in the spiritual framework that I believe and study, in that you are asked to give up nothing to have everything. And so I think these little glimmers, people are sitting in that discomfort, but maybe even taking one more step that on the surface, it looks like in a traditional way, they're not, serving their best interest. Like they're reducing their pay to, even in a very transactional way, they're reducing their pay to, increase the pay of other staff members. And then they see what incredible miracles come out of that. And in fact, they never gave up anything. All they got was more peace and joy and love. Their businesses are profitable, their staff are happy. And you're seeing these small acts of bravery as people are trying, going back to what Carrie was saying at the very beginning, as people are trying and stumbling and succeeding, and realizing that there is only fabulous things at the end of this journey. There is healing, there is equity, there is sacred moments, there is integration and a new family that we have. And it's just getting past that block that I have to hold on to what I have. I can't give it up. That's an illusion. That's an illusion. You have only everything to gain. So that gives me a lot of hope.
Jen, how about you?
I think just understanding that everyone is doing the best they can with the information they have at this very moment, and I have to believe that. And at some days, I feel like maybe grossly optimistic, but I'd rather be that any day than the opposite, right? And so I think just remaining positive and understanding that, yeah, if I stopped believing that something's going to get better, then of course it's never going to get better. So it definitely the power of belief, and not only it all started with me believing in myself, in building Cheekbone Beauty, and now believing in everyone else that they all have the ability to do and be the best that they possibly can be too. And then that's when you'll see all of us doing great things together.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you. Thank you, all of you. I've been listening and doing what I do, which is kind of tracking the story that's emerging in all of the mix of all of this. And what I heard is like the first bit of information was really like the story of trying. We're in that story of trying and what motivates us to try and what does trying feel like and look like and what does that inspire or trigger next, which then moved us into this place of the story of safety and lots of different kinds of safety, right? The safety of data for the 2x4, right? The safety of representation and being seen, the story of hope and possibility, the story of the mix, like there was like safety shows up in many different ways in different businesses. And then this third piece, as we moved into hope, was I wasn't quite sure because there wasn't a word we all used, but I would call it the story of vision and our seeing, what we're seeing or how we're believing, or it might even be the story of joy, because I could certainly feel that in the space between us. So thank you so much for this really challenging conversation that honestly usually either goes one of two ways. It either goes all to the joy, let's just believe, camp, or it goes to the complaint and how hard it is camp. And I think there's a lot of hope in seeing that we went all through it. And it does feel a bit like a scraping the surface because there's so much under, to this iceberg underground of this. But thank you for your contribution for all of our viewers who will take this and bring their own questions and inquiries. And, you know, you possibly have just given them representation in their own trying as they move forward. So thank you for being here. I'm just going to read a few things from my script to close properly and make sure I tie up all the things. And if you need to scoot off because we're over our time, that's okay. But I'm just going to make sure I invite everybody who's here. I want you to know at Powerhouse that we activate and amplify the relational work of change makers. We're a community of practice for leaders and a platform committed to co-creating an interconnected world. And our FireCircle 2022 Healing Our Systems is a relational leadership gathering across sectors, bringing leaders together over a virtual fire to reimagine from within the systems that we are in for future generations. So we hope that we will see you many, many times, not just at the fire, but we'll see you in the house, and we will continue to reimagine together. Thank you to Janet, to Hillary, to Carrie, to Jamie, to Jen, and all of the notes to connect with all of their businesses will be in all of the stuff that you're underneath all this. So thank you for being here. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you.